Welcome into Seahawks Today, powered by Chat Sports. Tyler Jones here with you. Appreciate you joining us. Coming up on today's show, we are going to look at 5 free agent options for the Seahawks as the NFL Draft is in the books. The post-June 1 cuts are nearing very soon. And so who are some options for the Seahawks to potentially look at in free agency? We know they have limited cap space. We'll break that all down for you in just a few moments from right now. Before we do that, though, we want to make sure that you like today's video. If you are a Seahawks fan, here's your chance to prove it and show your love to the Seahawks. Like the video and show that you are a true Seahawk fan, that you're an OG, that you're a part of what's going on in Seattle. And, you know, I got to tell you, I don't have the Tom Brady contract that he just got from Fox by any stretch of the imagination, but we're doing what we can around here with our resources to bring you the best Seahawk coverage on the internet. So like the video, show your love for the Seahawks, and let's get to today's video. So let me preface this. Before we get into these names that we're about to bring you on today's show, I got to tell you, none of these guys are long-term solutions. When you get to this point in free agency, you're not looking for guys that are going to be the face of your franchise. You're looking for guys that can be a Band-Aid of sorts, that can fill those needs that you have maybe after the draft and provide a veteran role of some sorts to be a leader to the younger players on your roster. That's what you're looking for at this time in free agency. So with that being said, keep that in mind as we give you these names for the Seahawks to look at. Let's start with James Bradberry. Bradberry, one of the newest free agents on the market, was just caught by the New York Football Giants this past week after they failed to find a trade partner for him. Bradberry coming off a 4-interception season this past year. That was a career high for Bradberry, but he also gave up more touchdowns than he has his entire career as well. So a mixed bag for James Bradberry this past year. I got to tell you, though, I like James Bradberry for the most part. For me, this is a high-quality player to be available at this point in free agency. Now, the Seahawks, as mentioned, have limited cap space at this point in time. But with the June 1 cuts coming, maybe you have some money that's going to free up there, potentially, to have a guy like Bradberry on your roster. Another thing to think about as we mention these names, besides just Bradberry here, is this idea of the cap. Is it a myth to begin with? When we hear the terms that there's not enough money, you can always find money somewhere. So if the Seahawks want to find a starting caliber cornerback like James Bradberry here, maybe that money is available somewhere. They do need a number 2 corner option of some sorts. We saw what they did to provide some depth this offseason with the moves they made in the draft and free agency, but those were nickel corners for the interim. They don't have a true number 2 corner at this point in time. So with that being said, what do you guys think? Who should the Seahawks do? What should they do with James Bradberry? Should they sign him and bring him to Seattle? Type Y for yes, in for no in the comments section. Let your voice be heard if you think the Seahawks should bring Bradberry in. Got an ad break coming up. While that ad's playing, get those votes in and tell us what you think. Take advantage of that ad break and tell us if you think Seattle should bring in Bradberry. All right, here's another option for you. Justin Houston, 4-time Pro Bowler. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Tyler, you idiot, he's with the Ravens right now. Not quite. The Ravens applied an unrestricted free agent tender on Houston that only helps the Ravens if he's signed by July 22nd. So, Justin Houston knows he will be playing football somewhere next year. Remains to be seen where it is exactly. But essentially, you had to outbid the Ravens is how this works with the tender that was put on him. Now, good news for the Seahawks. He can play in a 3-4 scheme that the Seahawks will be a part of. So he can adjust to that. That's good news for them on that front. And, you know, I got to tell you guys, I used to cover the Kansas City Chiefs for a long time. And people seem to forget. It wasn't that long ago. Back in 2014, Justin Houston had a 22-sack season. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And when we talk about that veteran leadership of trying to coach up young guys, the Seahawks have a guy that they believe in mightily in Boy Mafe, right? who they selected in that second round. If you're looking for somebody to lead a defense, to be that veteran voice, to train up some of those young guys, I love what Justin Houston brings to the table. I think he would be a great fit on that front. He has been there and done that and been successful on the highest stage of the National Football League. So, although Justin Houston is clearly on the back end of his career, coming off a season where he had 4.5 sacks last year and 6 tackles for loss, I would like the idea of Justin Houston for, as we mentioned, just these short-term solutions for this defense here in Seattle. Now, we have more players to get to on the show, but before we do, I want to hear from you guys. Name one player the Seahawks should sign in free agency. Is there a guy that catches your attention? Tell us in the comments section one player that you think the Seahawks should consider. Now, another name to mention, Jarvis Landry, the former Cleveland Browns wide receiver, a 5-time Pro Bowler, led the NFL in receptions in 2017. And for Landry, I think it's pretty well established that the Seahawks have Metcalf and Lockett as your number 1 and number 2 receivers. But Landry, if he's your number 3, would be about as good as any number 3 receiver in the National Football League, if we're going to be all honest. And with the production that we've seen from Landry, I know that he was injured last year and had a down year, but it wasn't too long ago that we saw Jarvis Landry, when he was healthy, play at a high level. I think he still has some good football left in him at this point in time. I really like what Jarvis Landry can bring to the table. Now, he probably won't be cheap, but I think that Jarvis Landry would be somebody that could help a young quarterback like Drew Lock really elevate this offense and be a really good receiving weapon. So we'll see. Jarvis Landry, a name to keep in mind. I personally think he's the best wide receiver remaining on the market right now, if you ask me. But we'll see what the Seahawks think as far as Landry goes. Now, we mentioned that the Seahawk team has some really good rookies. And whether it's Boy Mafe, Kenneth Walker, Charles Cross, whoever it may be, you got to get your hands on one of these jerseys that are made available. You can't wear that Russell Wilson jersey anymore, so you might as well get one that you can wear for a long time. Charles Cross, Kenneth Walker III, all those guys are available on chatsports.com/SeahawksRookies. That's chatsports.com/SeahawksRookies. Get yours now, and then you're going to wear it all throughout training camp and right up to the start of the season. Get your hands on one of these, and you're going to stand out in the crowd because you're going to be one of the very first people to have these jerseys. Just log on to chatsports.com/SeahawksRookies. Another name, Jadeveon Clowney, 3-time Pro Bowler, former number 1 overall pick. He actually played for the Seahawks back in 2019, and he's coming off his second highest sack season of his career. He had 9 last year. An old friend in Jadeveon Clowney. I like Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney has proven that he can play some really good football throughout his career. And, you know, this was somebody that there was a lot of high expectations for when he entered the National Football League. Before he was even draft eligible, we all remember the big play that he had against Michigan in the Outback Bowl several years ago. And ever since then, there has been a lot of hype about Jadeveon Clowney, and he's lived up to the expectation at this point. I like what I've seen from Clowney, and coming off a season where he had 9 sacks, you put him in Seattle, familiar with Pete Carroll and how things work with this Seahawks team, he could be a very good fit. I would love to see a reunion of Jadeveon Clowney coming back to the Seahawks. Got one more name for you in just a moment. Before we do, here's your chance to weigh in the comments section. Grade the Seahawks offseason so far. It's been an offseason of a lot of changes in Seattle, from moving on from Russell Wilson to everything else that's occurred with that draft of Charles Cross and Boy Mafe and Kenneth Walker III. How have the Seahawks done to this point? Here's your chance to tell us in the comments section. Put a grade on it. A, B, C, D, or F. Maybe you even want to give it an A+ or an F-. I don't know. Here's your chance. Tell us in the comments section how you think the Seahawks have done so far this offseason. And one more name for you, Julio Jones. Julio Jones is a future Hall of Famer. No question about it. 7-time Pro Bowler. And if you go back to 2020, he was still putting up terrific numbers with about 15.1 yards per reception that season. And just like Landry, you could potentially have him as the best number 3 receiver in the NFL if he is your guy in that spot for the Seahawks if they find him there. I'm a little surprised that Julio still remains available at this point. He's been a free agent for quite some time. And the thing that I think Seahawk fans probably would like best about Julio Jones, he reminds me actually of DK Metcalf. And I know that we're used to saying about a younger guy reminds me of an older guy. But in this case of the Seahawks here, I think that you have the familiar face in DK, who's been there and been a great target for the last few years. And if you pair him up with Julio Jones, kind of the older version of him, this could be a good 1-2 punch. And then you look at it from a defensive standpoint. You can never double anybody at that point in time. If you have Lockett, DK, and Julio there, what are you going to do? And you have some big play threats if that's available. Look, the only thing about Julio Jones is that the red zone passing game for Julio has not been necessarily a big strength, not as much as you would think with Julio Jones. So that's my one caveat with Julio Jones, besides just the injury history, is I would like to see more of a red zone presence with Julio Jones, but maybe that's something that they could look at of adjusting of some sorts. Take advantage of that 6'3", 220 body frame that comes with Julio Jones. So there you have it. That is a few names for the Seahawks to look at in free agency. A reminder, as always, subscribe to Seahawks Today. We are the only YouTube channel on the entire internet that is covering the Seahawks each and every day with daily Seahawks content. So subscribe now. Turn on the notifications. You will not regret doing so. YouTube.com/Seahawks TV to be a part of what we're doing each and every day. Thanks for joining us.